At last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge. NERDS!
Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom, and welcome to a comedy movie review that could be a little bit close to our hearts. And we are talking about Revenge of the Nerds, which is it's getting on a bit now. This is a over 30-year-old movie.
31 years
and nerd culture has changed a lot, and this is quite an interesting film to discuss. This kind of like late on after it was released. So, Pauline, tell us a little bit about what happens.
So,
in
Revenge of the Nerds is about a couple of nerds who, one of them doesn't really realise he's a nerd, doesn't really think of himself in that aspect, going off to college and a kind of experiencing college life and all the different types of groups of cliques, I guess, that you have. So you've obviously got the jocks, then you've got the cheerleader girls, you've got the nerds. And I guess they're the three kind of main ones, and then obviously because it's set in America, they've got all the different houses, fraternities that you can be part of, and it kind of follows these two nerds going through the realisation of what they are, trying to get together their own fraternity and experiencing the jocks being the butt of the jocks' jokes, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's quite a light-hearted film.
Yeah. Kind of. It has a fey things I'll come on to. So it's really kind of in your Porky's vein, I guess. You're more recently a kind of American Pie style thing, where the kind of basically the crux of the story is these downtrodden nerds kind of band together basically, and we've got a variety of different kind of not nerd styles, shall we say. To obviously overcome the threat of the popular jocks and stuff. So it's an interesting movie. I will prefix this by saying this obviously is an American film. The educational system and how it's set up is very different to how it is here in the UK. We don't really have the things like fraternities and stuff, and we never really have. I know it's kind of less so now, but some of this stuff is obviously being not from the US. We kind of watch and we know that that's what happens in the States, but we don't really have that here, even though I think UK culture is very much copying stuff that comes. Like, we didn't have proms when I was at school. That's relatively recent. Did you have it when you were?
Prom? No, it wasn't called prom.
School disco we had.
That was school dance for us.
But that's, again, now in sort of the last few years they've introduced that. But anyway, I'll be kind of going off on a tangent. So, but nerd culture, again, is very different than it was sort of over 30 years ago. Yeah. I mean, this film, there's like no pop culture references. I mean, when you think of nerds these days, you more think of, stuff like, Star Trek or basically popular culture, comics, video games, that sort of thing. I guess the difference between geek and a nerd, and I guess nerds are always considered more, studious basically. Yeah. But there's a fine line basically. But in this, obviously, it's the kind of the stereotypical view of nerddom, so to speak, 30 years ago. Yeah. And before we did do this kind of review, I did a little bit of research on the actual movie, and essentially the actors in here really didn't want to do these roles because they felt they were so negative. They had to be kind of talked into doing these roles, and despite what you may think, a lot of these actors have gone on to do stuff King of the Nerds, but they're not nerds. These guys they didn't want to do these roles. Also, a lot of the actual dialogue is completely ad-libbed because there wasn't a lot of story in the scripts. A lot of the kind of stuff was actually improvised and kind of just, they went with the flow basically, which does add to some, some funny moments. But here's the thing, that the crux of this story is acceptance, and basically, you should accept whoever they are, anyone who's downtrodden. But this goes a little bit, watching this now, this could be said of a lot of 80s comedies, to be fair, it's so, you couldn't get away with this stuff now. No, you couldn't. Because it really hammers home certain stereotypes. It's meant to be saying, oh, you've got to accept everyone, blah, blah, blah. but it really plays on some real like stereotypes and that sort of thing that we would think of, and in borders on quite offensive. Plus, so the sort of the sexual humour, this day and age, we can be considered a little bit rapey. Yeah. To be quite honest, and probably
There's
sexual.
One scene in particular.
Yeah. So you quite liked it.
Yeah, I did actually. I think just because it's the whole 80s humour, back then, people didn't really have this whole politically correct thing, whereas now I think nowadays we're far too overly politically correct about everything. It's just quite, again, like I said, it's quite light-hearted if you don't take a serious look on some of this stuff.
Yeah. And
you're quite happy just to kind of go, at the end of the day, it's just a movie. It is quite light-hearted, it is quite fun. There was some bits in it that I kind of sat and went, no, geeks would do, and sorry, nerds would so not do that. They would not be doing that. But yeah, I did, I just liked it. I liked the stereotypes in it, I thought they were really well played.
A lot of, I guess the modern equivalent is stuff like the Big Bang Theory. That's how a lot of people, and that's been criticised for this, having like geek nerd culture played by and written by people who are not from that. So I still quite enjoy that, but whatever. A lot of people find that to be counterproductive, to we say. And this is kind of true of this as well. I did find it funny. It's definitely a film of its time, and just to go on something you've touched on, we all use the internet if you're watching this video, and people love to jump on someone if they say something which can be remotely controversial. If you're that type of person, don't watch this film because it's gonna just pee you off. It's kind of funny. I actually quite like it. They basically join this fraternity, which is essentially Lama Lama Lama, isn't it? And it's kind of an African American. Fraternity primarily, I guess, until these guys join, who all but one are white. Yeah. And I actually quite liked those scenes. I thought that the characters from the previous ones were quite good, and obviously, it's saying these guys have been prejudiced with other things, shall we say? Yeah. But so it kind of touches on some sort of deeper things. I never felt it was. Hilarious. It has some funny moments. Yeah. But at no point was I like, oh my god, this is. I have seen this before, and there are a few sequels as well. But it has some funny moments, but I was never like rolling around. But obviously, times have changed a lot since then. Anything else you want to say about it? Again, positives. Any negatives?
The only negatives that I kind of have were but then again, I guess this is going off of my thoughts of a stereotypical nerd or a geek, and those things that they were doing in it, and sorry if this is going to spoil it for anybody, but things like where the nerds were having a house party and suddenly they were all smoking weed. I was like, nerd probably wouldn't do that. It's not really.
Some would, but not all of them.
Exactly. But then again, that's going off of a stereotype probably that I'm thinking of. So there was just, and like I said, just a few bits where there was a couple of the nerds who seemed to be, especially the main guy. Can't remember his name now.
Actually, you've reminded me of something. Anthony Edwards, is it?
I think that's it. Yeah.
He's the actor.
And I just felt like his character came across quite confident in the beginning, and then all of a sudden he wasn't.
I thought he was the weakest character at the main cast. Actually, I'm glad you reminded me about that. But it's focused on a few characters, but he's your kind of your central character, I suppose. Yeah. But he didn't really have anything particularly interesting about him. No. I didn't think. Yeah. Whilst a lot of the other characters, Robert Carradine and basically are a little bit more edgy. They've got a little bit more something to them, even though they're kind of like pretty much. They have this one, one of them's like basically gross. One of them's kind of got this stupid laugh. They've got this one thing that they do, But Anthony Edwards' main character was just kind of bland. Yeah. To be quite honest.
I think his only thing was his laugh, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. So he's going to be, I guess, your bridge character. But again, just one last thing. These days, I think back then you had not quite as so many subdivisions of culture that you have these days. You just had the sort of like the jocks, the nerds, that sort of thing. But these days there's so many permutations of different culture that basically we have in our sort of youth now. You don't have this kind of clear line anymore.
No.
So it's an interesting sort of throwback film as to how people saw geeks, and this is kind of really before things like video game culture and stuff like that. And I mean, was it 1984? Was it?
1984.
So Star Wars was a kids, really for kids back then. They didn't have the collecting that you did sort of, later on in life and everything. So it's an interesting come to look back on because it's obviously changed so much, and we could have a whole video talking about that subject. But we are talking about this film again, and we'll kind of rile it back in. So what do you think? What's your score here?
My score, by the way, I just wanted to make another little point.
Sure.
The good thing about, one of the really good things about the movies is the whole nerds versus jocks. It's quite heavily based on that, because I know we kind of diverged about all the other stuff and nerdom and all that, but it's
quite a lot of nudity in this film as well, actually.
Yes, it does.
Quite a lot of actually.
It's mostly it's a lot of tits, not much ass, but
well, you see a little bit more than tits.
But yeah, you do actually. But yeah, I mean, overall, I would probably say, again, I think it's just an easy movie to watch. Not much that you have to focus on, so I'd probably give it a 7.5.
Okay, I'm going to go 6 out of 10. So there you go. Have you seen it? What do you think of it? Leave us comments. And what do you think about this whole past nerd and geek culture? How do you think it's changed? Leave us a comment. We'll look forward to you next time. Bye for now.